heaven and hell. The state of innocence of the angels in heaven. 1. 276. What innocence is and its nature, few in the world know, and those who are in evil know nothing at all about it. It is, indeed, visible to the eyes, as seen in the face, speech and movements, particularly of little children. Yet it is not known what innocence is, and still less that it is that in which heaven is stored up in man. In making this known I would proceed in order, and speak first of the innocence of childhood, then of the innocence of wisdom, and lastly of the state of heaven in regard to innocence. 277. The innocence of childhood or of little children is not genuine innocence, for it is innocence not in internal, but only in external form. Nevertheless, one may learn from it what innocence is, for it shines forth from the faces of children and from some of their movements and from their earliest speech, and affects those about them. It can be seen that children have no internal thought, for they do not yet know what is good and what is evil, or what is true and what is false, of which such thought consists. Consequently, they have no prudence from their proprium, no purpose or deliberation, thus no intention of an evil nature. They have no proprium acquired from love of self and the world. They do not attribute anything to themselves, regarding all as received from their parents. They are content with the few insignificant things presented to them, and delight in them. They have no anxiety about food and clothing, and none about the future. They do not look to the world and covet many things from it. They love their parents and nurses and their child companions with whom they play in innocence. They suffer themselves to be led, they give heed and obey. 3. Being in this state they receive all things with their life. Therefore, without knowing why, they acquire becoming manners, learn to talk, and have the beginning of memory and thought, their state of innocence serving as a medium whereby these things are received and implanted. But this innocence, as stated above, is external, because it belongs to the body alone, and not to the mind. Men's for their minds are not yet formed, the mind being understanding and will, and thought and affection therefrom. For I have been told from heaven that little children are especially under the Lord's care, and that they receive influx from the inmost heaven, where there is a state of innocence, and that this influx passes through their interiors, and that in its passing through, their interiors are affected solely by the innocence. It is because of this the innocence is shown in their faces and in some of their movements and becomes evident. Also, it is this innocence by which parents are mostly affected, and that gives rise to the love that is called natural affection storage. The innocence of little children is not true innocence, but true innocence dwells in wisdom. The good of childhood is not spiritual good, but it becomes such by the implantation of truth. Nevertheless, the good of childhood is a medium whereby intelligence is implanted. Without the good of innocence in childhood man would be a brute. Whatever the mind is imbued with in childhood appears natural. 278. The innocence of wisdom is genuine innocence, because it is internal, for it belongs to the mind man's itself, that is, to the will itself and thence to the understanding. And when there is innocence in these there is also wisdom, for wisdom belongs to the will and understanding. This is why it is said in heaven that innocence dwells in wisdom, and that an angel has as much wisdom as he has innocence. This is confirmed by the fact that those who are in a state of innocence attribute nothing of good to themselves, but regard all things as received and attribute them to the Lord. Also they wish to be led by Him and not by themselves. They love everything that is good and they delight in everything that is true, because they know and perceive that loving what is good, that is, willing and doing it, is loving the Lord, and that loving truth is loving the neighbor. They live contented with what they have, whether it be little or much, because they know that they receive just as much as is good for them, those receiving little for whom little is useful, and those receiving much for whom much is useful. They also recognize that they themselves do not know what is good for them, the Lord alone knowing this. For in all things that He provides He looks to eternal ends. To neither are they anxious about the future. Anxiety about the future they call care for the morrow, which they define as grief on account of losing or not receiving things that are not necessary for the uses of life. With companions they never act from an evil end but from what is good, just, and sincere. Acting from an evil end they call cunning, which they shun as the poison of a serpent, since it is wholly antagonistic to innocence. As they love nothing more than to be led by the Lord, attributing to Him all things that they receive, they are removed from their own proprium, and to the extent that they are so removed from their own proprium the Lord inflows. In consequence of this, whatever they hear from Him, whether by the word or by means of preaching, they do not store it up in the memory, but instantly obey it, that is, will it and do it, their will being itself their memory. For the most part these outwardly appear simple, but in internal things they are wise and prudent. These are meant by the Lord in the words, "Be ye prudent as serpents and simple as doves." Matt 10:16. Such is the innocence that is called the innocence of wisdom. 3. Because innocence attributes nothing of good to itself, but attributes all good to the Lord, and because it thus loves to be led by the Lord, and the reception of all good and truth, from which wisdom comes, is derived therefrom. Therefore man has been so created that during his childhood he is in innocence, though external, and when he becomes old he is in internal innocence, to the end that he may come by the former into the latter, and from the latter return into the former. For the same reason, when a man becomes old he dwindles in body and becomes again like a little child, but like a wise child, that is, an angel. For an angel is a wise child in an eminent sense. This is why, in the word, a little child signifies one who is innocent, and an old man signifies one who is wise and whom is innocence. In the word little children signify innocence, likewise sucklings. An old man signifies one who is wise, and in an abstract sense wisdom. Mass is so created that in proportion as he verges towards old age he may become like a little child, and that innocence may then be in his wisdom, and in that state he may pass into heaven and become an angel. Next, I will read the state of innocence of the angels in heaven. 2. Thank you.